Welcome! Let me take you on a roller coaster of drama, persistence, and a neighborhood showdown that ended with HOA Karen winning. Yes, you heard that right. Grab a snack because this one's a wild ride. It all started last summer when my wife Emma and I finally achieved our dream of installing an in-ground pool in our backyard. After years of saving, getting permits, and ensuring everything was done by the book, our backyard oasis was complete. To ensure privacy, we had an 8-foot fence installed and locked gates for safety. We thought we had it all figured out. Little did we know our biggest challenge wasn't the construction or the costs. It was Karen. Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of the neighborhood and president of the Homeowners Association, HOA, made it her mission to right what she believed was an injustice to the community. Here's the thing, our house technically wasn't part of the HOA. The previous owner had specifically excluded this lot when the subdivision was built. This crucial detail would become a major sticking point later. About 2 weeks after the pool was completed, I came home to find Karen and 3 kids splashing around in our pool like it was their personal water park. Confused and annoyed, I went to confront them. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "This is a private pool. How did you get in here?" Karen gave me a condescending smile, the kind that makes your skin crawl. "Oh, you must be new here," she said, waving me off. "I'm the HOA president. Since you didn't file the proper paperwork for this pool, it's now a community amenity." I was floored. "Ma'am, this is my private property, and we're not even part of the HOA. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Karen crossed her arms. "Don't be ridiculous. All properties in Oakwood Heights fall under the HOA's jurisdiction. I've been president for 5 years, so I'd know." I explained politely at first that our property was exempt from HOA rules. But Karen wasn't having it. She dug her heels in, acting as if her title gave her absolute authority. Things escalated quickly. Karen left, but not before announcing she'd bring the HOA lawyer into this. A week later, we received an official notice from the HOA claiming we'd violated rules by failing to get approval for our pool. They demanded we open the pool to the community or face legal consequences. Determined to stand our ground, Emma and I gathered all our documentation, property deeds, permits, and even old subdivision maps showing our property's exclusion from the HOA. Armed with this, we attended the HOA meeting to set the record straight. Karen was smug as ever, surrounded by her loyal followers. "This is a simple matter," she declared. "The homeowner refused to comply with HOA rules, and this pool is now a community asset." Our lawyer, Jim, presented our case. He laid out every document showing we were not part of the HOA. At first, it seemed like we were winning. The room was silent as Jim explained the legal boundaries. Karen, however, was prepared to turn the tables. Then Karen struck. "These documents are outdated," she argued. "The HOA board voted last year to expand our jurisdiction. This property is now under HOA governance." Jim pushed back. "Can you provide documentation to support that claim?" Karen smiled. "Of course," she said, pulling out what appeared to be an amended HOA bylaw. The board members nodded in agreement. My heart sank as it became clear the board was in her pocket. The HOA board voted to uphold Karen's claim. Despite our protests, they ruled that our pool now fell under HOA jurisdiction. It was devastating. Emma and I considered suing, but Karen and her army of lawyers seemed determined to drag the case out for years. The cost alone would have drained us. We reluctantly agreed to comply. Our pool became a community amenity, with Karen setting the rules. She even held a ribbon-cutting ceremony, acting like she'd done the neighborhood a great service. Meanwhile, we watched as strangers swam in the pool we'd poured our hearts and savings into. It was humiliating to see our dream project turn into a public resource under Karen's control. Karen's grip on the HOA tightened. She began implementing new rules and restrictions, using her position to assert authority over other homeowners. Word spread quickly about her behavior, but many residents were either too intimidated or too indifferent to challenge her. Meanwhile, Emma and I tried to make the best of the situation. We started hosting small gatherings for neighbors we trusted, trying to maintain some semblance of control over what was left of our backyard oasis. Months later, we discovered Karen's victory wasn't as clean-cut as she thought. It turned out she'd bent some rules herself to expand the HOA's jurisdiction. This included pressuring certain board members and manipulating meeting minutes. A few neighbors started questioning her leadership, but Karen's grip on the HOA remained strong for now. Meanwhile, Emma and I decided to adapt. We started keeping meticulous records of every interaction with Karen, taking notes on her behavior and the HOA's actions. We also quietly reached out to other neighbors who'd had run-ins with Karen. Slowly, we began to build a network of support. The final straw came when Karen decided to host an HOA community day at our pool without even informing us. We arrived home to find a full-blown party in progress. Food trucks, music, and dozens of people. Karen greeted us at the gate as if she were the owner. It was infuriating. "This is for the community," she said smugly. "You should be proud to contribute." Emma and I retreated inside, fuming, but we knew this was the ammunition we needed to expose Karen's overreach. We reached out to Jim once again, compiling all the evidence we'd collected over the months. Photos of unauthorized events, emails showing Karen's manipulation, and testimonies from other residents painted a clear picture of abuse. We planned to bring it all to the next HOA meeting. As tensions grew, cracks began to form in Karen's support system. Several board members resigned, citing her aggressive tactics and the growing backlash from residents. A few even started quietly apologizing to us, admitting they'd been pressured into supporting her claims. Finally, a neighborhood meeting was called to address Karen's actions. Emma and I attended, armed with our documentation and a newfound sense of resolve. Jim joined us once again, ready to lay out the case against Karen. "This is not just about the pool," Jim began. "This is about abuse of power, manipulation, and the erosion of trust in this community. My clients have been unfairly targeted and stripped of their rights as private property owners." Karen tried to defend herself, but her arguments fell flat. Residents began speaking out, sharing their own grievances. By the end of the meeting, it was clear Karen's reign was nearing its end. However, she had enough allies to remain in her position for the time being, and the fight was far from over. This wasn't the end of our story. In fact, it was just the beginning. Karen's reign of entitlement wasn't limited to our pool. She'd soon turn her sights on another target, my solar farm project. But this time, the outcome would be very different. If you thought the pool drama with HOA Karen was over the top, buckle up for round two. This time, she set her sights on my solar farm project. What started as an ambitious plan to go green turned into a legal nightmare. But trust me, this one had a very different ending. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss one of our stories. Let's jump right in. After Karen's victory over our pool, Emma and I decided to focus on another dream, installing a solar farm on the unused portion of our property. We wanted to reduce our carbon footprint and save on energy bills. Plus, we'd done our research and found that the state offered generous incentives for renewable energy projects. It seemed like a no-brainer. Of course, Karen had other plans. As with the pool, we made sure everything was by the book. We filed permits, hired licensed contractors, and carefully planned the installation to avoid disturbing neighbors. The panels were placed in a sunny corner of our property well within our boundaries. It was all smooth sailing until Karen showed up. She marched into our yard one morning, clipboard in hand, as the contractors were finishing the installation. "What is this?" she demanded, pointing at the panels like they were an eyesore. "It's a solar farm," I replied, trying to stay calm. "We've got all the permits and approvals. Everything's legal." Karen narrowed her eyes. "This is against HOA guidelines. Solar panels need to be pre-approved by the board, and these are a blight on the neighborhood's aesthetic." I couldn't help but laugh. "Karen, we're not part of the HOA, remember?" Her expression hardened. "We'll see about that." And with that, she stormed off. That night, Emma and I double-checked every single document related to our property's status. We knew Karen wouldn't give up easily, and we wanted to be fully prepared for her next move. A week later, I received a certified letter from the HOA demanding that I remove the solar panels immediately or face fines and legal action. Apparently, Karen had convinced the board that my solar farm violated their updated guidelines. Sound familiar? This time, though, I was ready. I'd learned my lesson from the pool debacle. I gathered every piece of documentation I had: permits, property surveys, state incentives, and most importantly, proof that our property was still not part of the HOA. I even printed out screenshots of emails between Karen and the board, which hinted at her personal vendetta. Karen didn't care. She escalated the situation by filing a lawsuit, claiming my solar farm devalued neighboring properties and violated HOA standards. As we braced ourselves for another battle, I made sure to document everything, from Karen's visits to our yard to the hostile letters she sent. Emma even started keeping a log of all interactions with Karen. The situation reached a boiling point when Karen began holding impromptu community meetings outside our property, gathering supporters to complain about the blight caused by our solar farm. Emma and I watched in disbelief as Karen paraded neighbors around, pointing at the panels and spewing exaggerated claims about property values. It was absurd and frustrating, but it also solidified our determination to fight back. By the time the court date rolled around, Emma and I were fired up. We brought our lawyer, Jim, who was just as ready to take Karen down as we were. Karen showed up with the same smug attitude, her lawyer looking like he'd bitten off more than he could chew. Karen's argument was that my solar farm was an unsightly disruption to the neighborhood and a violation of HOA guidelines. She claimed it was my responsibility to seek board approval, even though I wasn't part of the HOA. Jim stood up calm and confident. "Your Honor, my client's property is not under the jurisdiction of the HOA. This has already been established in previous legal disputes. Furthermore, the solar farm complies with all state and local regulations." Then he dropped the bombshell. "I'd like to present evidence that the HOA's actions are not only baseless but retaliatory. Here are the documents showing their jurisdiction does not include my client's property, as well as emails and meeting minutes revealing that this lawsuit was initiated due to personal grievances by the HOA president." Karen's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him off. "Is this true, Mrs. Thompson?" the judge asked Karen. Karen stammered, I was acting in the best interest of the community." The judge wasn't buying it. "It appears you've overstepped your authority, Mrs. Thompson. The court finds no merit in the HOA's claims. Case dismissed." Not only was the case dismissed, but the judge ordered the HOA to reimburse us for legal fees. Karen's smug facade crumbled as the court ruled in our favor. For once, we walked out of the courtroom feeling triumphant. The best part? Word spread quickly around the neighborhood. Karen's grip on the HOA began to weaken as more residents questioned her actions. Some even started installing their own solar panels, inspired by our victory. Neighbors began reaching out, asking for advice on going solar and navigating HOA policies. As for us, our solar farm has been running smoothly ever since. It's saved us thousands on energy bills and even earned us some state tax credits. We've turned the once unused corner of our property into a productive, eco-friendly space. Better yet, we've hosted workshops for neighbors to share our experience and encourage renewable energy projects. In the weeks following the court case, Karen's influence over the HOA dwindled even further. A few board members resigned, admitting they'd gone along with Karen's antics out of fear of her wrath. It felt like the tide was finally turning in the neighborhood. But Karen didn't stop entirely. For weeks, she continued to spread rumors, claiming that our solar panels caused glare that blinded drivers and interfered with local wildlife. It was desperate and easily disproven, but it was clear she was losing her ability to control the narrative. More neighbors began speaking out against her, emboldened by her courtroom loss. When we thought it was over and Karen would now be humbled, you won't believe what happened next. The part we are all grateful for was what the end was. Karen's antics have taken a new turn, and this time she targets Rajiv, our Indian neighbor, and his wonderful family. What started as another attempt to enforce her so-called authority turned into a spectacular unraveling of Karen's reign. Let's jump in to see how this tale of entitlement became Karen's ultimate undoing. Rajiv and his family moved into the neighborhood about 6 months after Karen lost her court battle over my solar farm. Rajiv, a successful chef and restaurant owner, brought a refreshing sense of community with him. He hosted gatherings, shared his incredible cooking, and quickly became a beloved figure in our neighborhood. His wife, Priya, and their 2 kids were equally charming, and their house was always filled with laughter and the tantalizing aroma of home-cooked meals. Of course, Karen couldn't stand it. From the moment Rajiv moved in, Karen found ways to nitpick. She complained about everything from the family's brightly colored Diwali decorations to their backyard garden. "It's not in keeping with the aesthetic of the neighborhood," she'd sniff, even though everyone else loved the festive lights and lush greenery. Karen's jealousy was palpable, but things really escalated when Rajiv decided to cater the neighborhood potluck. Rajiv offered to cater the annual HOA potluck, bringing a variety of mouth-watering Indian dishes from his restaurant. The entire neighborhood was thrilled, except for Karen. "We have guidelines for events like this," she announced at the HOA meeting. "All food must be pre-approved by the board to ensure it's safe and appropriate." Nobody took her seriously. Rajiv's reputation as a chef was impeccable, and his generosity was welcomed by everyone. On the day of the potluck, Rajiv and his team arrived with trays of butter chicken, biryani, samosas, and gulab jamun. The scent alone had neighbors lining up for a taste. Karen, however, was nowhere to be seen until she was. Midway through the potluck, Rajiv stepped away from the food table to chat with some neighbors. When he returned, he noticed several trays of food were missing. Confused, he asked around, and that's when someone mentioned seeing Karen loading the trays into her car. Rajiv approached her calmly. "Karen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Some of the food from the potluck seems to have ended up in your car." Karen didn't even blink. "I'm just taking what's owed to the HOA," she said. "You didn't pay the event fee, so this is my way of ensuring compliance." Rajiv was stunned. "I volunteered to cater this event. There is no event fee." Karen crossed her arms. "That's not how things work around here. If you want to participate, you need to follow the rules." It was clear Karen wasn't going to return the food, so Rajiv decided to let it go for the moment. But he wasn't about to let Karen's behavior slide entirely. The following week, Karen's actions became the talk of the neighborhood. Several neighbors, fed up with her antics, began sharing their own experiences of Karen's entitlement and harassment. One neighbor revealed that Karen had once demanded access to their pool, while another recalled how she'd tried to enforce HOA rules that didn't exist. Rajiv, with his calm demeanor and community spirit, quickly became a rallying point for change. As neighbors united, Karen's history of unreasonable demands began to unravel. Stories surfaced about how she had fined people for petty infractions, like leaving their trash bins out for an extra hour, or pressured homeowners into repainting their houses to meet her aesthetic standards. The more people talked, the clearer it became that Karen had been abusing her authority for years. Things came to a head when Priya discovered their security camera footage showed Karen sneaking into their yard at night and tampering with their outdoor kitchen. Karen claimed she was inspecting it for compliance, but the video told a different story. It showed her rearranging items, jotting down notes, and even attempting to open a locked storage cabinet. Rajiv and Priya knew they couldn't let this slide. Rajiv and Priya presented the footage at the next HOA meeting. The room was silent as the video played, showing Karen rifling through their belongings and making notes on her clipboard. "This is unacceptable," Rajiv said firmly. "No one in this community should have to deal with this kind of harassment." Several neighbors stood up in support. One shared how Karen had trespassed on their property to inspect their landscaping, while another recounted how Karen had fined them for parking their car in the wrong direction. The overwhelming sentiment was clear. Karen's reign of terror had to end. The meeting ended with a vote to remove Karen as HOA president. It was unanimous. Even Karen's staunchest allies couldn't defend her behavior anymore. The footage, combined with months of complaints, was the final nail in the coffin. Karen was stripped of her title and effectively ostracized from the community. Shortly after, Karen put her house on the market. Word spread that she'd moved to a new neighborhood, but even there, her reputation seemed to follow her. Meanwhile, Rajiv and his family became even more beloved in the community, hosting events and bringing neighbors together in a way Karen never could. Rajiv also made sure to channel the ordeal into something positive. He organized a neighborhood diversity day, celebrating different cultures with food, music, and stories. The event was a massive success, further strengthening the bonds between residents. It was a stark contrast to the division Karen had fostered during her time as president. Karen's downfall was a reminder of the power of kindness, unity, and standing up to entitlement. Rajiv's patience and generosity made all the difference, and the neighborhood emerged stronger and more connected than ever. Thanks for sticking around to hear the conclusion of Karen's saga. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more slices of drama, redemption, and community spirit. See you next time.